Microphone provided. Paul.
Thank you. Hi, Ange.
Hey.
Ange, do you have any fresh injury concerns ahead of the Nottingham Forest game? And in particular, is Brennan Johnson okay to face his former club?
Yeah, Brennan's fine. He's no problem. The only one is Richie. He's had a bit of a niggle with his knee the last couple of weeks, and we kind of feel he probably better he takes this weekend off and sort of hopefully totally recovers and be available for Newcastle next. But everyone else is fine.
As much as you're aiming for higher than top four in the short term this week, you've gained a point on Aston Villa. Manchester United have lost. Do you see it as a straight shootout between you and Aston Villa for Champions League football next season?
Look, the latter positions and points tally would suggest that, but as I've said many times, it's not something that's at the forefront of my mind. What's more important to me is how we're playing and to finish the season strong, and wherever that takes us. So I'm not looking at other clubs' results on the weekend to see whether we can get into the fourth position or whatever position it is on the ladder. I just don't think that's where we are as a team. We've got to focus on ourselves this year, and as I said, finish strong. And if that means we finish fourth or whatever, then great. But we're getting to the tail end of the season now. I think we've got 8 games to go. I think Villa's got 7. So, but you can see on the weekend and during the midweek, every game's there's some. Everyone's fighting for something. It's a good time of the year to be involved.
Away from Tottenham, it is the Old Firm this weekend. I just wondered, will you be watching? How would you sum up that rivalry?
Yeah, I think it's early on Sunday, so I'll definitely be watching. And it's one of the biggest rivalries in world football, mate. And I'm very much on the green and white side. And hoping the lads. I know what it means to the supporters to win that game. It's as much as we talk about derbies and they mean more, this one does. I lived and breathed it for a couple of years, and it's a really important game for both clubs. And looking how tight the table is this year, I think takes on extra significance because that most of the time that's what's going to separate the two sides maybe at the end of the year. So be a cracking game, and I'll be tuning in.
Hi, Ange. You said on Tuesday after the West Ham game that your attack lacked a bit of clarity of thought. We have seen, though, a really nice understanding develop between Brennan Johnson, who's been fantastic last couple of weeks, and also Timo Werner. So I just wondered, how do you view that attack when you have those two playing with Heung-min Son up front?
Yeah, no, that part of it I think has been developing well, and part of our process is you try and provide information, feedback to the players, but it's up to them to take that on board and put it into action. I think it helps when they get rewards for it, and certainly Brennan, as you said, and Timo both sort of scored or assisted the last couple of weeks, probably longer than that, last 4 or 5 weeks, which is great. But that's not our only avenue to attack, and I thought the other night we had some better options out there. We just rushed a little bit. That was kind of looking at our analysis. We got into some great areas, and probably, some of our decision making wasn't great. And probably we had more time than we thought. But again, you provide that feedback back to the players, and hopefully, we can begin to sort of develop in that area as well.
West Ham's equaliser, of course, came from a set piece. I just wondered how much of a concern, or is that something that you're looking at in training, working on specifically in training, trying to reduce the number of goals that you concede in from set pieces?
Yeah, look, I don't think we've been. I think we've been pretty good at set pieces. I mean, you always get every goal you concede is down to something. It was a decent delivery the other night, and they got some big guys. The rest of the set piece, I thought we handled really well. I thought we gave away too many corners. I think that was an issue for us when you do against a team like West Ham, who are such a big side physically, and they got such great delivery with Bowen and Ward-Prowse. You're asking for trouble. So I thought, again, that was part of the game. We thought we could have handled a bit better, not to give away so many. But I think, I think those kind of things, people just kind of look at snapshot. I mean, our winning goal against Luton came from a defensive corner, our setup. So, I think with all these things, I tend to take a longer term view on them. And for the most part, I think we've been pretty decent.
And finally, for me, obviously you faced Nottingham Forest on Sunday. They're fighting for their lives at the bottom of the table. They got a big win over Fulham in midweek. So what kind of a challenge are you expecting from them on Sunday?
Yeah, massive. As you said, they're fighting for every point, every goal, and I mean, I think you would have noticed that across every game that everyone is fighting for something, whether that's up the top, up the bottom, in the middle. Everyone's fighting for something, and from our perspective, we know that we have to hit a certain level of effort, competitiveness every week, and for the most part, we've been pretty good. I mean, I think the Fulham game was probably the one that was disappointing for us, but even against West Ham, as we weren't pleased with the outcome, but it's a difficult place to go. They're a very well organised side, and it wasn't through lack of effort that we didn't get what we needed, and it's going to be the same on the weekend. For Forest, like I said, everything for them is crucial at the moment, so they're not going to come here and just give us anything. We're going to have to earn everything, and be up to us to do it.
Angelo, Brennan Johnson going up against his former club Forest, and I just wondered how he's developed. I was just looking since January. He's got 5 goals, including one for Wales, and what sort of changed? How have you converted him into being more lethal, really, since you signed him in August?
Well, I think we've made him more lethal. I think his goal scoring record before he arrived to us was pretty decent. I just think we play obviously a little bit differently, and it takes time, and especially in those front areas. I've said before that there's a lot more pressure on new signings because they get invariably measured against outcomes in terms of goals and assists, and if you don't have that, then. But his general play was always still very good for us. But what I think now, he's found a bit of confidence and a bit of consistency in both an understanding of the way we play, and like I said, he's getting the rewards, which is great. But he's still a young guy, and we bought him with very much an eye that whatever he does this year, we know there's a lot more in him, and when you see improvement, that kind of encourages us even more, because it means that if we invest the time in him, he's going to become a super player for us.
That's Charlie, please. Hi, I just want to ask, this week Spurs financial results came out and look healthy. Is that something now, as manager, you have to be, I know it's very dry, but is that something you need to be conscious of with thinking about the summer and targets and PSR and all of that? Yeah, I mean,
the detail of it is not it's not my area, again, of concern or expertise. It's more, like I said, the overall picture of, where we are as a football club and what it means for us in terms of, further building on what we've started, and that is important, because if we were restricted, I've only had 2 windows so far to kind of try and build a side we hope will be successful. If there's a more positive outlook from a financial perspective, then that certainly helps us with our planning and kind of not just for this window, but for the next couple of windows, and potentially what we can do to sort of get the squad to where we need it to be.
Was that something you were conscious of when taking this job? Is that a question you ask now as a manager? Well, how are they set, financially, investment-wise, and all of that?
Well, to a certain extent, but you at the same time, that ultimately, until you're in the role and you understand exactly, the workings of the football club and what's going to be required. I think you always go into these things with your eyes wide open, in that, you don't expect sort of real clarity about anything until you're actually in the role. So you can ask the questions, but, it's like, they can ask me questions about how the team's going to play, but until I actually put it into practice, they're just words, So, from my perspective, I think, I've had a pretty sort of clear line of communication as to where we're at as a football club, and what I've sort of taken on hasn't surprised me in any way. We're in a good position, and hopefully we can build on that.
One thing as well, some fans want to see against low blocks players taking more shots from range. And I'm just wondering, I know this
You're just wondering if that's how I coach?
No.
Do a poll amongst supporters and say, what do you reckon we need this week?
No. This is a very niche question, but I just mean like, in a game model like yours, is that just like a side point? You know, is that something you would ever talk about against a certain team? There will be spaces. Can we have more? Can we have more shots from distance rather than that kind of, you know, more intricate way of playing?
Okay. Yeah, so are my players allowed to shoot?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They get fined if they shoot.
I get that. You probably would have had that. Yes, they're allowed to shoot. Yeah. No, look, it's you know, as I said the other night, there was some opportunities there that we probably, you know, we kind of rushed things in terms of, you know, the way we could create more opportunities for ourselves. But again, I always think those kind of things are just a moment in time. I think if you look at the goals we've scored this year, I can remember at least, you know, 2 or 3, Sonny in particular, scoring from outside the box. So it's not something that, you know, there's no, especially in that front third, a lot of it is around the quality of your players and the instinctiveness on your players. And all the teams I've had, I try and make it as less structured in that front third as possible. But you always, I think, achieve better outcomes or more possibilities, more avenues to goal, because ultimately that's what my teams want to do, score goals, and they always have, is, you know, by creating some sort of fluency that allows players to make the best decisions in there.
Hi, Ange, how are you?
I'm good, mate.
Just going back a little bit to the financial stuff you were talking about just now, and budgets, and looking forward to maybe bringing players in the summer. Spurs, one of the only teams that actually spent money during the January transfer window, and clubs generally were watching very carefully what they were spending. Thoughts the Premier League going to have new financial rules and maybe not take points off teams that go over it, but maybe a financial penalty. Is that the way forward regarding clubs maybe spending more money and adding more quality to their squads?
I reckon you're as kind of intricately sort of, your understanding is about as good as mine with that question in terms of what's happening. Look, I understand that, you know, obviously there's, and I come from a world where it has been very, very regulated. So equalisation in Australia, a bit like American sports, is very, very big. Yeah. So I've come from that world and I didn't like it one bit. But there's always an understanding you've got to sort of create some sort of competitive balance so that, you know, there isn't too much of a divide between, you know, clubs that, you know, can spend you know, at random almost at times against clubs that have restrictions. So you want to keep that balance. But I've always felt not at the expense of bringing the, you know, or demotivating people from being the best they can be. And sometimes I've felt, so in Australia we've had, you know, a salary cap, and we've had, you know, I think a bit similar to what they're calling a luxury tax, and it keeps the competition even, yeah, but I always felt it also suppressed the ability to kind of, you know, maybe try and be better than the rest. Yeah, America's kind of similar, but I think whatever model they come up with, you know, it's that balance of keeping it competitive, because you do want competitive leagues. You don't want teams just to outspend and win things, but at the same time not suppress that ability for excellence, you know, because I've always said it's not just about having money, it's how you spend it, you know, and you can spend, I can have half the money somebody else does, and if I spend it better I can still beat them, you know, so it's that balance. But for you and me, mate, we'll leave that to the financial people. We'll talk about the football.
Something I may understand more is football then. Much was made of your late goal against Sheffield United because it came straight out. I think it was the latest goal at that moment scored in Premier League history. There was a later one last night. Why are we getting so many late goals? And our matches now almost, are you preparing almost for 2-hour matches?
2 hour, not...
Sorry, 1 hour and a half.
No, you're right. But I think it is. It's a product of, you know, the extra time we are playing. And I think I've said it before, I used to kind of make substitutions around the 60-minute mark, but knowing there's about half an hour or so to go. But now I know that very few games will last less than sort of 95, 96, 98 minutes sometimes. So you got to factor that into it now. And I think that also means that your players need to be aware that 90 minutes is not the end of the game. A hell of a lot you saw that last night, but still a lot can happen in that last period because sometimes we look at the clock and say, it's the 80th minute mark, there's 10 minutes to go, but actually it's probably 20 minutes to go when you think about all the stoppages that can happen, and your players and the way you kind of use your subs, I think becomes important in that.
And finally, for me, you've often said about you don't look at the league table this year as being a barometer of success, but how your team are moving forward and for next season. But are you further on at this point now than when you walked through the door on day one you thought you would be?
I didn't have any sort of thoughts on where we'd be. I kind of knew, obviously, after the disappointment of last year, that we had to show signs of progress, or else might not even be sitting here if we didn't. So that was the first thing: is can we progress, and what does progress look like? For me, progress looked like, well, the players we sign are going to be important. The windows, I think we've had 2 positive windows. I don't think there's any doubt about that. How we play, well, whether you think it's effective or not, we've definitely changed the way the team plays. We've got we're in a better position on the table if people want to look at that. So you all those things suggest we have made progress, but I'm really, my reticence around saying it's been a success is that doesn't mean progress means it's been a success, because I still think every year you go into trying to win something, and we're not going to win anything this year. So, I can't walk away from that single fact, but in terms of getting us to the point where we can win things, well, there's enough signs there so far, but I still want us to finish the season strong to say that, we're in a decent place.
Hi there, Nuno. Nuno, sorry, I was writing about Nuno. I was just writing about Nuno. You're not Nuno, obviously. Chelsea game, we now know...
Talk it out, mate. Just
trying to get out.
That's fine, yeah.
We now know when the Chelsea game is going to be.
Yeah.
Obviously, you've kind of gone from having a few weekends off and wanting more games. You've now got a week where you've got, I think it's Arsenal at home, Chelsea away, Liverpool away. Is that the other extreme? I mean, how do you view a week like that?
I know. I guess my point has been all year, and even that'll come back off the back of us having a weekend off again, 15 days without a game. So I've just said all along, to me, it's not about the games or the weekends. We just haven't had any sort of fluency in our calendar. And like I keep saying, some of that's self-inflicted because we're not in Europe. We haven't had sort of significant cup runs, but it just feels like now we're going to play a couple of games. We've had midweek game, play on the weekend, then play Newcastle, then we're going to have another weekend off. We're going to be sitting on our hands for 2 weeks, and then people say, that you'll be nice and fresh, and then we're going to play 3 games in a week. So for me, it's just we haven't had the rhythm this year. Like I said, apart from maybe the first sort of 10 games of the year, we had Carabao Cup, and there's a game pretty consistently then. It just seems like it's been stoppages, and we knew that anyway. Now going into that, obviously with the teams we've got left, Man City's in the Cup, FA Cup, Chelsea are in the FA Cup, we knew we'd get it further disruptions. So it is what it is. We just got to deal with it, and sort of plan for it the best way we can.
The reason I mentioned Nuno's obviously he's coming back. I think it's for the first time this weekend. A very short spell, relatively, here at Tottenham. Obviously, now you probably know better than most people what it's like to kind of manage within this club. You could see what a challenge it is for managers, regardless of how good they are.
Yeah, but I think every job, especially in the Premier League's like that. I hesitate to say that Nuno'd say that Forest is a pretty big challenge as well. So it's just the nature of the beast in terms of the competition you're in, and irrespective of which club you go to. And there's a far more shorter term outlook on everything these days, and that includes football. And as a manager, whichever job you get these days, you kind of know you're not going to have the luxury of too much sort of leeway to not get things right. And some clubs move quicker than others, I guess, but for all of us, it's just the world we live in now, where that's the scrutiny you're under. That's there's a lot of sort of extreme reactions to things that invariably make people take action. And more often than not, it's the manager that's kind of on the tail end of that. But yeah, I think for all of us, we understand that we go into these roles with their eyes wide open, and I'm sure Nuno, when he went into Forest, didn't think it was going to be an easy task, and when he came into here, didn't think it was going to be an easy task. But like I said, that's, as you said, rightly said, that's not the measure of whether somebody's a good manager or not.
Briefly, I want to ask you about Giovanni Lo Celso. Felt like a season that was maybe going to promise quite a lot for him. Obviously, it looked like his future was maybe elsewhere, and then you and him kind of had a chat about what this season was going to bring. Been quite a fragmented one for him. Obviously, had a few injuries. Why do you think it hasn't quite hit the heights and maybe not got the minutes that maybe he would have wanted this season?
Well, it's just all those things you said. But it's not just him. There's been a few in that boat where they just haven't had a real good run at it in terms of, there has been injury disruptions. Other times when he's been fit, other players have sort of been playing in his position. But, I still think, he's been good for us this year. Through that middle patch when we had a lot of injuries, he kind of really stood up for us, and then he got his own injury, of course. And, he made a real impact against Luton on the weekend, and, really helped us sort of get over the line. So he's a fantastic player. But with all these things, you got to keep a perspective of we're at a big club, we're going to have a big squad, and if it's not Gio, it'll be somebody else who will play that role next year. No one's going to play every game, and it doesn't happen at all the big clubs. So, I've never really worried about, whether sort of the game time players are playing. If they want more game time, then, there are other clubs that can do that. I'm looking at contribution, and, with somebody like Gio, like I said, he has contributed to us this year, and that's been the most important thing for me.
Okay, we'll finish this section with James, please.
Hi, Ange. Sorry, just back on the financials. The club did announce a loss of 86 million. It's obviously, big number. I mean, will that have a big impact on your transfer plans this summer?
See, now you're getting into the detail, mate. You're dragging me down. And as I said, my discussions around those kind of issues are not the minutiae of a balance sheet. It's about us planning to build a side that potentially can be successful. So that's what we're doing. And nothing that's going to come out in the balance sheet is going to disrupt those plans, because those plans are done in alliance with the people who make the balance sheets, for want of a better word. But, it's not like, we're going to wait for the financial results before we start thinking about who we're going to sign. All this stuff's already in planning, and we kind of know what position we're in and, what we need to do in the summer. Doesn't mean it's all going to come to fruition, of course, because, there's all sorts of things that other factors that come into it. But, our planning's well underway into what we need to do. And, but, there's no doubt that, from our perspective, we're not one of the clubs that are going to be as restricted as others.
You've spoken a lot about the evolution of the team being more important than just getting into the Champions League. But is there not a financial pressure, though, to qualify, given it does give clubs a big jump in revenue?
Yeah. But it doesn't guarantee anything. I keep saying it. I don't know why people don't understand.
Well, I'm talking about the financial aspect of it.
Yeah, okay. So if I ask you, well, Newcastle made the Champions League this year. Did it help them last year? Did it help them this year?
Financially, it did, yeah.
But did it help them in a football? We're not banks. We're football clubs. Yeah, we're not financial institutions. I don't get measured by the balance sheet at the end of the year. I get and you can see how difficult it is for a club to juggle Champions League, and if you're not building a squad. And, to be fair to Eddie, he's had horrendous injuries this year, and it makes it hard. What I'm saying is, Champions League, great. Money, great. Does that mean we're going to finish third next year? No. In fact, it's probably going to be more challenging. So my role in that is not to worry about the financial pressure of making Champions League, is to create a squad that hopefully can compete in the Champions League and keep improving in the Premier League and have success in the cup competition. So that's kind of where I differentiate. I'm not saying that, of course, everyone wants to, if they're not going to win the league, get into the Champions League because, like you said, the financial rewards, but that's not the measure. How much money you make is not why you get into the Champions League. It's what you do with that money, and do you build on it? Do you build a squad, or you just say, well, because we're in the Champions League, next year will be great?
It's the money that the point I'm making is the money that comes with it that gives you the chance to build and pursue perhaps a more aggressive plan or do it more quickly because of that money's there to then go and use it. I'm not saying the Champions League by itself is a success.
Okay, so were we in the Champions League this year? No. So did we progress this year?
Yeah.
Yes. So again, we're saying the same thing, is you can do it with, you can do it without. It comes down to good decision-making, good coaching, good players, good administration. It's when you fall into the trap of thinking that money is the answer that you don't get the outcome. So, I could have sat here this year and said, well, look, we don't have Champions League, we don't have Champions League's money, so how can I progress? I never said that. I said, we've got to make progress. We've got to be better than we were last year. So if we're not in the Champions League next year, I'm not going to turn around and say, well, we can't progress because we're not. Yeah. So I think we're both saying the same thing, but I'm just saying that I don't think it's as big a part of it as people make out. The money it's a significant part of it, but it's definitely not all of it.